On August 21, 2026, Dolly Parton called People magazine and said that she was dealing with a few minor health issues, nothing serious, just some things she had neglected while taking care of her husband, and that she would be back soon. Her voice was still warm, still witty, still joking that the doctors dig more stones out of her every year than the quarry in Rockwood, Tennessee. Fans read the interview and breathed a sigh of relief. Dolly was still Dolly, still blonde hair, still rhinestones, still a smile that could warm an entire stadium. 4 days later, her nephew Brian Seaver posted a video on Instagram that left America stunned. "I am speaking on behalf of the Parton and Owens families today to announce the passing of my aunt, Dolly Rebecca Parton Dean. This announcement video is something Dolly asked me to make years ago, long before I truly absorbed it as a future reality. The woman whom a divided America had agreed to love, the one who sent more than 200 million books to children around the world, yet had never been a mother herself, the one who built a $650 million empire from a cabin with no electricity where the midwife was paid with a sack of corn, had died at the age of 80, just days after telling the world that everything was fine. The world fell silent. Not the silence of rumor or confusion, but the silence of real loss, the kind of loss you feel in your chest before your brain has time to process it. Because somewhere behind the voluminous blonde wig and the glittering sequined outfits, behind the fist joke, it costs a lot of money to look this cheap. Behind the 11 Grammy Awards and the smile that never faded, there was a woman the world had never truly seen. A woman who one afternoon sat alone in her bedroom, stared at the gun in the drawer, and then picked it up. A woman who wrote more than 3,000 songs about love and spent her entire life with a man half the world didn't believe was real. What really happened in those final days? What was the cause of death when the family refused to disclose it? And who was the woman behind the legend, the barefoot little girl from the Appalachian Mountains who had every reason to give up long before the world ever knew her name? Before answering, we must go back to a small cabin in Locust Ridge, a place where poverty allowed no one to dream, except for one little girl who refused to listen. Long before Nashville, before the Grammys, before the $650 million empire, there was a skinny little girl standing barefoot on the cold dirt floor in Locust Ridge, Sevier County, in the Great Smoky Mountains of Tennessee. Dolly Rebecca Parton was born on January 19, 1946. The fourth of 12 children crammed into a 2-room cabin with no electricity, no running water, and no telephone. The midwife was paid with a sack of corn because the Parton family had no money, nothing but the dirt under their feet, and more mouths than food on the table. Her father, Robert Lee Parton, was a farmer and construction worker, a man who worked from before dawn until after dusk, yet never learned to read a single line in his life. He was illiterate. He never wrote his own name, never read a road sign, never signed any document without using an X in place of a signature. His greatest pain was not poverty. Everyone in Locust Ridge was poor, but being locked outside the world of written words, looking at a page and seeing only meaningless shapes. That detail will return, and when it does, it will explain the greatest legacy Dolly Parton left the world, greater than every song, greater than every award, greater even than Dollywood. But not yet. Her mother, A.V. Lee Owens Parton, was the one who brought melody into the house. She sang the old Appalachian folk songs every night by the fire, the ballads their ancestors had carried from England and Ireland to America centuries earlier, and turned the freezing cabin into a place with rhythm. The 12 children bathed in the creek because there was no bathroom. 3 or 4 shared a bed, and in winter, when temperatures dropped below freezing, the only warmth they knew was one another under a thin blanket, and when one wet the bed at night, the others treated it as a comfort. Dolly told that story not to shock. She told it so the world would understand that the place she came from had no room for dreams. But amid that grinding poverty, there was a story Dolly would tell and retell for 60 years, until it became a song, a movie, a metaphor for her entire life. One day, Mother A.V. Lee took scraps of fabric, leftover pieces from old clothes others had given them, and sat sewing by hand every stitch into a little coat for Dolly. The coat was a patchwork of every color, no 2 pieces the same, looking like something anyone else would throw away. But her mother said the coat was sewn with love, and therefore it was more precious than any coat money could buy. Dolly believed her. She wore the coat to school. The children laughed. They called her raggedy, poor trash, mocking every patch on her body. Little Dolly stood in the schoolyard, surrounded by laughter, and for the first time felt the weight of contempt. She did not take the coat off. She wore it home and put it on again the next day. She refused to be ashamed of what her mother had sown with love. That moment shaped the formula for Dolly Parton's entire life. Take what the world considers worthless and turn it into the most valuable thing of all. In 1955, Mother Avie Lee gave birth to another baby boy and named him Larry. Dolly was 9 years old then, and when her mother placed the baby in her arms, she treated Larry like the real doll that poor children never had the money to buy. She held him, she rocked him, she loved him with the pure love of a child who knew nothing of loss. 4 days later, Larry died. The cabin fell silent. That detail would also return, decades later, when doctors told Dolly she would never have children, and the little girl who had once held baby Larry was still standing somewhere inside her, still holding the child she had lost. As Dolly grew up, there was another battle. She began wearing makeup, tight clothes, imitating the image of a woman in town whom the whole community called the town tramp. Red lipstick, dyed blonde hair, high heels. To little Dolly, that was the first woman she had ever seen whom she found beautiful free, unlike the resigned women around her. Her father hated it. Her grandfather even beat her for the way she dressed, for not looking proper by the rural Appalachian standards of the 1950s. In that world, daughters had to be modest, had to be discreet, had to obey men. Dolly looked that world straight in the eye and said no. I'd rather go against my daddy than go against myself. That was not a statement about fashion. It was a declaration of identity, and it would repeat at every turning point in her life. Every time she was told to change, every time she refused. She built a guitar out of a cornmeal box and 2 strings of rope when she was 7. At 10, she appeared on local television in Knoxville, more than an hour's drive from home, singing on Cass Walker's show. At 13, she stood on the stage of the Grand Ole Opry, where Johnny Cash looked at the skinny mountain girl and told her to trust her instincts. She recorded her first single as a teenager on a tiny label no one remembers. Music became the place poverty could not reach, the place the mocking laughter could not follow, the place where the Parton girl was not the child in the patchwork coat, but someone worth listening to. Every melody she sang was a conversation between the wounded child and the future version of herself. Then one summer day in 1964, right after graduating high school, Dolly Parton picked up a small suitcase and boarded a Greyhound bus, leaving Locust Ridge for Nashville. No money, no connections, no backup plan, nothing but her voice and the refusal to accept that her life had already been written by poverty. The little girl in the multicolored coat was looking for a bigger stage than the schoolyard, and this time she would not let anyone laugh without paying the price of admiration. On her first day in Nashville, 18-year-old Dolly Parton stepped outside for a walk to see the city she had dreamed of her whole childhood. A tall young man standing by the road in front of the wishy-washy laundry, on the way to drop off dirty clothes, called out to the strange girl walking on the sidewalk. Dolly waved. That young man was Carl Dean, 21, a Nashville native who owned a small asphalt paving company, a man who loved quiet so much it was almost abnormal in a city built on music and stage lights. Years later, he would recount that moment with the precision of someone who had relived it in his mind thousands of times. My first thought was that I was going to marry that girl. My second thought was, my God, she's beautiful. And that was the day my life began. Dolly remembered a different detail, one she told in a calm voice that carried more weight than any declaration of love. I was surprised because he looked at my face when he talked to me, which was rare for me. She did not say it outright, but the meaning was clear. Most men who met Dolly Parton did not look at her face. Carl was different from the very first second. On their first date, Carl did not take her to a restaurant or a movie. He drove straight home to introduce her to his parents because, he said, the moment he saw her, he knew she was the one he wanted to spend his life with. A laundry, a bag of dirty clothes. That was where a 60-year love story began. 2 years later, on May 30, 1966, Dolly and Carl were married in a ceremony the record label did not want to exist. No party, no guests, only Dolly's mother, the preacher, and the preacher's wife. The label had advised her to hide the marriage, saying a country singer with a husband would lose her appeal to male audiences. Dolly refused to hide it, but she also felt no need to show it off. She married her own way, quietly and defiantly, just like the little girl who wore the patchwork coat to school and refused to take it off. From that day on, Carl Dean almost disappeared from the face of the earth. He never attended award shows, never walked red carpets, never stood beside his wife in front of cameras. He stayed so hidden that fans invented conspiracy theories that Carl Dean was not real, that Dolly Parton had invented her husband. The last time he was photographed publicly before his death was in 2019, and before that he had not appeared on camera in nearly 40 years. Their life together was so simple it was almost unbelievable when set against the empire she would build. They drove around Tennessee and Kentucky, sometimes spending the night at a Days Inn where she could sneak in unrecognized. Dolly said, "We didn't care, as long as the bed was clean and there was a bathroom. That was how we lived." Carl was the only one who saw the real Dolly. No wig, no makeup, no rhinestone armor. Carl loved me for the person I was, not for Dolly Parton the star. In a world where everyone wanted something from Dolly Parton, a photo, an autograph, a contract, a piece of the spotlight, Carl Dean only wanted Dolly. He was her home, the living embodiment of the phrase she would repeat all her life. Never forget where you came from. But if Carl Dean was the one who loved her most without demanding anything, Porter Wagoner was the one who gave her everything and demanded it all back. In 1967, 21-year-old Dolly was invited by Porter Wagoner, the biggest country star of the time, to join his television show, the highest-rated country program in America. Porter brought Dolly to a national audience, helped her sign a recording contract with RCA Victor, and the two became the most beloved country duet of the era. But Porter's name was on the marquee. The control was in Porter's hands. Every decision was Porter's. Dolly was the girl singer, the girl who stood beside the main star and had to know her place. The pattern repeated from childhood. Her father and grandfather wanted to control how she dressed. She refused. Porter wanted to control her career. She refused. In 1973, when she decided to leave, Dolly did not know how to say goodbye in ordinary words. She wrote a song. That song was called "I Will Always Love You." And it was not the love ballad the world later imagined. It was a woman telling the man who had given her everything that she was grateful, that she cherished him, but that she had to leave to become herself. She sang it for Porter in the studio, he cried. He agreed to let her go. In 1974, the song reached #1 on the country charts. 5 years later, in 1979, Porter Wagoner sued Dolly Parton for $3 million for breach of contract. The man who had wept when he heard her farewell song now demanded she pay in money. The lawsuit dragged on and was settled out of court. The two did not speak for years. But Dolly never said a bad word about Porter, not once. In 2007, they reconciled. 5 months later, Porter died. Dolly was at his bedside 2 hours before he took his last breath. After everything, she was there. After leaving Porter, Dolly did not collapse the way many predicted. She exploded. Here You Come Again in 1977 reached the top 3 on the Billboard Pop chart. Then in 1980, everything changed at once. She wrote and recorded 9 to 5, the song that hit #1 on both the country and pop charts at the same time, while starring in the movie of the same name alongside Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin, a box office hit. A small woman from a cabin with no electricity, with a wig taller than her own head, a thick Southern accent that the elite considered a mark of ignorance, walked straight into Hollywood and forced them all to love her, not by changing herself, but by refusing to change anything. Islands in the Stream in 1983 with Kenny Rogers hit #1 on both pop and country. Steel Magnolias in 1989 earned critical praise. Dolly Parton was no longer a country star. She was a star, no adjective needed. But everything she built in that brilliant chapter, career, fame, the admiration of millions, was only the version the cameras captured. Because behind it, she was beginning to build something else, a financial empire whose final numbers, revealed after her death, would make the world truly understand its scale. To understand the true scale of the empire Dolly Parton built, one must begin with the decision she made, before most of her contemporaries even realized that decision existed. From the earliest years of her career, when she was still the girl singer, standing beside Porter Wagoner and had no significant power in the studio, Dolly Parton did something most country singers of the 1960s and 1970s did not do. She retained ownership of the publishing rights to her own compositions. She formed her own music publishing companies, Velvet Apple Music and later Blue Eye Music, and from then on every song she wrote, every melody she composed, belonged to her, not the record label, not the producer, not anyone else on the planet except Dolly Rebecca Parton. That decision, made quietly, without fanfare, by a mountain girl whom the Nashville business establishment did not take seriously as a rival, would generate hundreds of millions of dollars over the next 6 decades. And it began paying the biggest dividends in 1992, when Whitney Houston recorded "I Will Always Love You" for the soundtrack of The Bodyguard. The song Dolly had written through tears, while saying goodbye to Porter Wagoner, became the best-selling single by a female artist of all time. And because Dolly owned the entire publishing rights, every time the song played on the radio, streamed, was sung at a wedding, or was used in a film, the money flowed straight into her pocket. That one song alone generated an estimated more than $20 million in royalties. She turned tears into gold, just as the little girl once turned a patchwork coat into the most precious thing she owned. But music publishing was only the foundation. In 1986, Dolly opened Dollywood, a theme park in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, right in the poor region where she grew up, where her family had been mocked, where the little girl in the patchwork coat had been called poor trash. She held a 50% stake in the Dollywood company. The rest belonged to Herschend Family Entertainment. By 2026, the park was entering its 41st season, attracting millions of visitors each year, and Dolly's share of the entire complex, including the main park, Dollywood's Splash Country Water Park, and the upscale Dreammore Resort, was valued at approximately $165 million. Thousands of people in the Smoky Mountains had jobs because of Dollywood. She took Appalachia, the region that affluent America often mentioned with pity or contempt, and turned it into a destination people were willing to fly thousands of miles to reach. The multicolored coat once again, only this time not with a few scraps of fabric, but with an entire empire. At the time of Dolly Parton's death in August 2026, according to Forbes, her net worth was estimated at about $450 million. Celebrity net worth put the figure higher, at $650 million. The discrepancy reflected the complexity of an empire built on private assets, with no public balance sheet and no publicly traded stock. Her catalog of more than 3,000 songs was valued at over $120 million. Add to that income from licensing, merchandise, books, films, television programs, and the new hotel projects she was developing right before her death, including the Songteller Hotel and the Life of Many Colors Museum in Nashville. That ladder of ascent is worth pausing over for a second. A midwife paid with a sack of corn, then $650 million. From a 2-room cabin with no electricity to an entertainment empire stretching from Tennessee to Broadway, built not by inheritance, not by connections, not by any shortcut, but by a voice, the refusal to quit, and the strategic decision to keep her publishing rights that a mountain girl made when no one yet believed she was worth listening to. But what set Dolly Parton apart from every other rich person on the planet was not the money she made. It was the money she gave away. In 1995, she founded the Imagination Library, a program that sends free books every month to children from birth to age 5. Every month, a new book arrives at the door, completely free, no conditions, no distinction between rich and poor. To understand why she did that, one must remember the detail from earlier. Her father, Robert Lee Parton, remained illiterate his entire life. He never got to read his daughter's name on an album cover. He never got to read the lyrics she wrote for him. He never got to read the articles praising the child he was proudest of. When Dolly founded the Imagination Library, she was not doing charity in the ordinary sense. She was writing a letter to her father. Every book that reached a child's hands was a letter sent to the man who could not read, a promise that what he had endured would not be repeated for the next generation. More than 200 million books have been sent out to children in the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, Ireland, Australia, and many other countries. The little girl who grew up in a cabin that did not even have a single book created the largest free children's library in history. And there is another detail she rarely stated outright, but that anyone who understands her life story recognizes at once. She had no children. She never got to place a book into the hands of a child of her own, so she placed books into the hands of everyone else's children. In 2020, in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, she quietly donated $1 million to vaccine research at Vanderbilt University, a contribution that played an important role in the development of the Moderna vaccine. She did not show off, did not hold a press conference. I just wanted to help. 11 Grammy Awards, 46 nominations, Country Music Hall of Fame, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2022, an honor she initially modestly declined because she felt she was not rock enough, then accepted and recorded an entire rock album to deserve it. The Presidential Medal of Freedom, the Carnegie Medal of Philanthropy. She joked about it all with the most famous line of her life. "It costs a lot of money to look this cheap." The whole room laughed. But behind the joke was a truth she did not say out loud. She had fought her entire life to be judged by what she did rather than by how she looked, and that joke was how she disarmed the people who wanted to put her down before they could open their mouths. According to Forbes, Dolly Parton deliberately avoided becoming a billionaire through large-scale philanthropy, prioritizing social impact over accumulating wealth. She could have been a billionaire if she had held on instead of giving away. She chose to give. All of the above is true. Every award, every record, every number can be verified. But that is only the version the cameras captured, the version Dolly Parton allowed the world to see. Because in the very years of her greatest brilliance, in the very chapter when 9 to 5 dominated the charts, and Dolly became a Hollywood star, there was one afternoon, in her bedroom, when there were no cameras, no audience, no stage lights. She sat alone and looked at the gun in the nightstand drawer. In the early 1980s, at the absolute peak of her career, Dolly Parton began suffering severe unexplained pains she could neither explain nor hide. In 1982, she collapsed on stage and was rushed to the emergency room with internal bleeding. Doctors diagnosed endometriosis, a condition in which tissue similar to the uterine lining grows elsewhere in the body, causing intense pain and severely affecting fertility. In 1985, she underwent a partial hysterectomy, and the doctors confirmed what she feared most. She would never have children. Remember the 9-year-old girl in Locust Ridge, the girl whose mother placed baby Larry in her arms and who loved him with the pure love of a child who knew nothing of loss, only for him to die 4 days later. That little girl grew up, became a second mother to every younger sibling in a family of 12, and was now told she would never ever get to play that role for a child of her own. Dolly later spoke about it with a sentence so simple it was stronger than any lament. "I couldn't have children physically. I love children." At the same time, she developed a deep emotional relationship with a man she never named. She called it an affair of the heart, not a physical affair. But when that relationship ended, the loss piled on top of infertility, career pressure, and the physical pain, creating a perfect storm that no glittering outfit could conceal. She gained more than 20 pounds from binge eating. She received death threats after canceling a tour. And the most radiant woman on every stage in America was falling apart inside, piece by piece, while not one of the millions who loved her knew. Then came that afternoon. Dolly sat alone in her bedroom. She saw the gun in the nightstand drawer, the gun she kept for protection against burglars. She looked at it for a long time. Then she picked it up. She never described what she was thinking in that moment. She only said that right then her little dog Popeye, a Boston Terrier, ran up the stairs, the sound of his paws clicking on the wooden steps, tap, 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 pulling her back to reality. She put the gun down. She prayed. Years later, she said, "I don't think I would have done it, but I can't say for sure. Now, after having gone through that terrible moment, I can completely understand how it could happen, even to someone as solid as me, if the pain is bad enough." And this is what no photograph, no film footage ever captured. A few days after that afternoon, Dolly Parton walked back out on stage. Blonde hair, sparkling outfit, radiant smile. Thousands of people laughed with her, sang with her, loved her, and not one of them knew that only days earlier the woman standing in front of them had picked up a gun. The real tragedy was not the gun. The tragedy was that no one knew. She was in pain, and the world did not see it because she hid pain better than anyone on the planet. But Dolly Parton did not stay in the depths. She put the gun down, she prayed, and she did what Dolly Parton always did. She stood up and started again, not immediately, not easily, but one step at a time. Then, in the years that followed, as her career and empire continued to expand, life began reclaiming the people she loved most. Her father, Robert Lee Parton, the illiterate man who worked from dawn to dusk to raise 12 children, died in 2000. He left when the Imagination Library had been running for 5 years, when hundreds of thousands of books carrying his legacy had already reached children across America. He could not read the books, but he knew his daughter was repairing a wound she could never repair for him. In 2003, Mother Avie Lee died, the woman who had sewn the multicolored coat from scraps, who had sung folk songs by the fire, who had said that what is sewn with love is more precious than gold. In 2018, Brother Floyd died at 61. In 2021, Brother Randy, the child little Dolly had once held like a living doll after losing Larry, died at 67 after a battle with cancer. In 2024, Brother Dave died at 82. Of the 12 siblings who had once crowded into the Locust Ridge cabin, 4 were now gone, not counting baby Larry, who died at 4 days old. Each loss left the childhood home a little emptier, the circle a little smaller, but no loss prepared Dolly for what happened on March 3, 2025. Carl Dean died in Nashville at the age of 82 after 58 years of marriage. Dolly wrote, "Words cannot express the love we shared for over 60 years. A few days later, she released the song, If You Hadn't Been There, and then on television in May 2025, when the interviewer mentioned Carl, Dolly Parton, the woman who had never cried on camera in more than half a century, her eyes grew wet. I will always love him. I will always love him. The song written for Porter became Whitney Houston's multi-million-dollar hit, then became the farewell to the husband of 60 years. The same line carrying 3 meanings across 3 different chapters of the same life. Dolly did not only lose a husband, she lost home. She lost the only person on earth who had looked into her face at the laundry when she was 18 and still nobody. And then her body began sending the bill. Dolly admitted that during the time Carl was seriously ill, she poured all her strength into caring for him and neglected herself. I let a lot of things slide that I should have taken care of. In September 2025, she postponed her entire Las Vegas residency. Kidney stones caused infections. Her immune and digestive systems were disordered after years of neglect. In March 2026, at the opening of Dollywood's 41st season, she told the crowd, "I've been exhausted, grieving Carl and a lot of other things. I need to rebuild myself." In May 2026, she joked on social media, "They dig more stones out of me every year than the quarry in Rockwood, Tennessee." 80 years old, a widow, fighting illness, and still joking. But this time the body did not joke back. On August 14, 2026, Dollywood opened its new ride Night Flight Expedition, the park's biggest event of the year. Dolly Parton was not there. She appeared in a pre-recorded video, and in that video her voice was still warm, but her face carried a fatigue that longtime observers had never seen. She said the doctors in Nashville had clipped her wings, forbidding her to travel because she was dizzy and dehydrated. "If the doctor tells you not to go, then maybe you shouldn't go," she joked. But the joke came in a voice that careful listeners could tell was thinner than usual, missing the sparkling wit she had carried for 6 decades onto every stage. 7 days later, on August 21, Dolly spoke with People magazine, the last interview the world would ever receive from her. She admitted she was dealing with some health issues she had neglected while caring for Carl, that the doctors required her to stay near Vanderbilt where she was being treated, and that everything was nothing serious. She said, "I just want everyone to rest easy." That same day, or early the next morning, Dolly Parton was admitted to Vanderbilt University Medical Center in Nashville with kidney and autoimmune problems. Vanderbilt, the place where 6 years earlier she had quietly sent $1 million to help develop a vaccine that saved millions of lives, was now the place where she lay in a hospital room. And this time no amount of money, no song, no smile could change what was coming. 4 days after admission, on the morning of August 25, 2026, Dolly Rebecca Parton Dean died. She passed peacefully in Nashville, the city she had reached by Greyhound bus with a small suitcase at 18, the city where she met Carl at the laundry, the city she had turned into the center of a $650 million empire. She was 80 years old. The official cause of death was not disclosed by the family, and perhaps never will be, because even in death, Dolly Parton kept control of her own story. The same way she had kept the publishing rights to every song she wrote. The same way Carl Dean had kept his privacy for 60 years until the day he died. According to TMZ, she was hospitalized for kidney and autoimmune issues. According to what she shared in her final year, chronic kidney stones had caused infections, and her immune and digestive systems were disordered after years of neglecting her health, while pouring all her strength into caring for Carl before he died. She compared herself to an antique car that needs a 100,000-mile checkup. But that antique car had run too long without going into the shop. Nephew Brian Seaver, son of Cassie Parton and the man who had served as head of Dolly security team for more than 20 years, announced the news in an Instagram video, exactly as Dolly had arranged years earlier. This announcement video is something Dolly asked me to make years ago, long before I truly absorbed it as a future reality. I had imagined the weight of this moment but never truly felt it until now. Seaver, said Dolly, lived in the light and is now in the arms of the Lord Jesus, welcomed by Carl, her parents, and countless others. Then he ended with the 5 words the whole world already knew before he spoke them. She will always love you, and that was the 4th time that song carried a new meaning. The first time, in 1973, a 27-year-old girl wrote it in the studio as a farewell to Porter Wagoner, the mentor she had to leave in order to become herself. The second time, in 1992, Whitney Houston turned it into the best-selling single by a female artist of all time, and Dolly earned millions from Old Pain. The third time, on television in May 2025, a 79-year-old widow with wet eyes said, "I will always love him," when speaking of the man she met at the laundry. And the fourth time, on her nephew's lips in the video announcing her death, the song reversed direction for the last time. No longer Dolly speaking to someone, but the world speaking to Dolly. The same song, 4 meanings, across 4 chapters of the same life, and no screenwriter could have invented a loop so perfect. In accordance with Dolly's wishes, a small private ceremony was held for the immediate family, quiet, without show, exactly the way Carl had lived and died. The family asked that instead of flowers people donate to the Imagination Library, the program that at the time of her death was still sending books to hundreds of thousands of children every month, still writing the letter she had begun to her illiterate father, who had been gone for 26 years. Dollywood remained open, its 41st season, still creating jobs for thousands in the Smoky Mountains. The Broadway musical Dolly, a true original musical, was still scheduled to open. In August 2026, she was awarded 82 new global sales certifications, even though she was no longer here to receive them. The true legacy of Dolly Parton does not lie in a trophy case, not in 11 Grammys or $650 million. It lies in every child who opens an envelope and takes out a free book without knowing that the program exists, because a girl loved her father, the illiterate man, so much that she spent her life repairing a wound she could never repair for him. It lies in everyone who ever heard "I Will Always Love You" and felt something real without knowing that the song was a farewell, then a multi-million-dollar hit, then a goodbye to a husband, then the world's goodbye to her. It lies in every little girl anywhere who saw Dolly Parton and understood that she could be anyone she wanted to be, even when the whole schoolyard laughed, even when the world said a poor girl's daughter had no right to dream. Dolly Parton was not a cheerful country star, nor a victim of tragic fate. She was someone who lived at both extremes of the human experience, who stood on the highest peak and sat in the deepest valley, who picked up the gun and put it down, who lost everyone she loved and still chose to stand up every morning. Blonde hair, sparkling outfit, smile, not because she felt no pain, but because she chose the light. The barefoot little girl in Locust Ridge, the little girl who wore the multicolored coat while the whole school laughed and refused to take it off. That little girl lived 80 years without ever, not for a single day, taking the coat off. She wore it until the final moment, and it was still beautiful. If this story touched you, share your favorite memory of Dolly in the comments below. Subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell, because every week we tell the stories behind the legends, the real stories, the complete stories, the ones you have never heard. Dolly Parton, January 19, 1946, August 25, 2026. She will always love us.